Hello, my name is Sam, and I'd like to welcome you here to Bugcrowd's webinar for Finding Bugs with Burp Plugins and Bug Bounty 101. Today we have two presenters. The Finding Bugs with Burp Plugins presentation will be by Monika Morrow, and the Bug Bounty 101 presentation will be by Ben Sadeghipour. You can find their information on their slides, which will show up later in this video. But thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited about this webinar. We're going to continue to do more of them in the future. So if you like this, please like and share it with your friends. And also stay tuned to our website at bugcrowd.com, which of course you can go to find more information about Bugcrowd and our bug bounty programs and anything else you'd like to know about us. And you can also follow us on Twitter at twitter.com/bugcrowd. So thank you so much again, and we hope to see you again in the future with our future webinars and videos and blog posts. So thank you.
So I figured I would talk to you today about finding bugs with Burp plugins because it's one of my favorite things to do. So who am I? I'm a web and mobile application penetration tester. I work with AppSec Consulting down in San Jose. I'm a recovering software developer. I like to write code, but I don't get to do it very often. And I'm a huge fan of automation. So why would you want to write a Burp plugin? You want to automate the testing of applications that have automation-resistant features, such as a signature or some other things. We'll talk about a few more. You can automate finding new vulnerabilities. If you have a new novel way to do something, I'm looking at Carlos here. Do you think you could put your Microsoft thing into a Burp plugin and automate looking for it? Bypass of the cross-site scripting filter in IE. So Heartbleed was announced publicly on April 7th, and it only took 7 days for an extension to be out publicly and published. And if you go look at the GitHub, it was even a few days before that, that there was code there, and it was publicly published. It was there. It just wasn't it wasn't published on Twitter and hey, widespread, go look at it. But it was in the works. It was happening. So if you have some new novel thing, you can turn it into a Burp plugin and find lots of instances of it very quickly. So how are we going to do this? How are we going to overcome obstacles? So we can write our own code to run on any request we want to compute and add signatures, to add custom headers, or some requests, especially web services, like to have a field that has to be unique or random every single time. Burp doesn't do that out of the box, and I don't know of any other tool that does that out of the box, but it's pretty easy to make Burp do that with the Burp plugin. So you want to ensure thoroughness, so you can do custom scan checks like bypassing a cross-site scripting filter. I like to eliminate annoyances just because I hate annoyances. So one of the very first Burp plugins I wrote was just to turn off intercept by default. That's now a standard feature, but things like that, you can write Burp plugins to make a lot of those things happen. If you test the same thing all the time, I test different things all the time, but if you test the same thing all the time, you can have scope automatically set for certain things, even if you start with a totally fresh setup. And you can add custom functionality, display formatting, you can trigger alerts. So when Burp Extender first came out, it was not as friendly as it is now. And some people haven't gone back and looked at it because it was not as useful then as it is now. But almost 2 years ago now, December 2012, the API was greatly expanded. We got dynamic unloading and unloading of plugins, auto reload, so you didn't have to run them every time or have a bat file or a script to launch them for you when you wanted to use them. So there's 37 classes available. You can do tons of different things. Processing HTTP request responses is obvious, but you can interact with the cookie jar. You can do other things as well. And Burp likes to just keep rolling out features, and so in March they added the App Store, and it launched with just 14 extensions, but people have been very busy. We're up to 46 now. I counted today. And in April, they added all this functionality to the free edition. So if you're hunting with the free edition, not all plugins will work. Some of them use pro features, and those pro features, you can't just write an extension to get the pro features. But most of them are available in the free edition as well. And so if you haven't taken a peek in Burp over at the Extender tab, there's the App Store, and these are things that are ready to go. You check a box. You don't have to go find it somewhere and download it and compile it. And these are ones that people submitted to the store, and you can just use them. Like the Heartbleed one was submitted to the store, published. You check this box, you can test for Heartbleed from Burp. It has your standard documentation for everything that's been released in the API right there on the Portswigger website. I really do think that a programmer with very little experience can do this once you have some framework to work with. And so I'm going to show you primarily how to write. Okay, how I wrote. I guess you're doing a good job following along. So I have two extensions that I thought were pretty straightforward that I have up on my GitHub as examples of how to get code started that are good skeletons once you rip out the tiny bit of demo functionality. You can use them, fork them, write your own plugins, come up with more things to share with the world. Hide them for yourselves and get the best bug. And then one I added today that I've been sitting on for a little while that adds a GUI tab. Just to, if you wanted to share it with someone else, maybe you don't want them to have to recompile it to switch between enabling it for the proxy or for the scanner. So I released that on GitHub today, and so we'll take just a brief look at that. So Portswigger provides an empty project, but it's not enough to just, if you don't know a lot of Java, to just jump in and do it. But it's a great starting off point. And so I'm going to start with that for these examples. And so your current setup should probably be NetBeans 802, which is current, and a current JDK to match up with that. So the first one that I'm going to show you is designed to find and replace in proxy traffic. So the plugin is going to examine every request that comes through the tool, and if a target string is found, it's going to replace it with a dynamic value, which is something that Burp can't do out of the box, but it's very simple to implement. So in this example, the string will be replace me, and we're just going to replace it with the time in milliseconds, which we'll hope that's unique, that we don't get two calls to Java that are the same. So to do this, we would unzip the empty extension that downloaded from Portswigger's website into a new folder. You want to name it the outside folder finding place, because you're going to, if you write a bunch of these, you're going to end up with a bunch of folders, all named Burp Extender. So you need to sort them somehow. And you'll go ahead and expand the tree, and it will look something like this once you open it. And you'll see that your NetBeans will look like that if you write a bunch of Burp plugins. We'll just say Burp Extender over and over and over again. And if you expand the tree a little bit, even though there's all the API files are in here to compile against, the only one we're interested in is burpextender.java. So you open it, and there's not actually a lot of code in here, so you're like, well, now what do I do? So walking through the building of the skeleton to a useful skeleton, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set an extension name. We want to name ourselves something. So we'll name ourselves find and replace. And at this point, you can actually compile and test and make sure that it works. So gratification right away. So you compiled it, and it was successful. And you go to Burp, you go to the extension tab, and you go to load it. Your jar is going to be in the dist folder of that. And it's going to be burpextender.jar. And it's going to tell you that it loaded successfully. And it's going to say find and replace. Hooray, my slides work. So then we want to add some functionality to it, right? So we're going to add some code in here, a print writer, standard out, standard error, so that we have somewhere to put data should we need to communicate with ourselves very helpful for very basic debugging to throw stuff to standard out or standard error. And so that Burp knows that it should talk to us, we have to use the callbacks that was given to us to register the listener. So this first line is just telling Burp, hey, when you have stuff going on, I want to listen to that. And so this has once you register an HTTP listener, you have to implement it, and it only has one function, and so it's called process HTTP message, and this will be called anytime any tool, because you see the tool flag, and whether it's a request or a response, and then you're going to get a bunch of information from Burp in that message info object. And so just to have a proof of concept and make sure that what we put together is working, we're going to print out process HTTP message called, and at this point, every single request response is going through Burp. And so you can see down in the bottom of the screen there, process HTTP message is called, once for the request and once for the response, so you're going to see two every time you hit something. And that was by making that request through the browser, so that went through the proxy, and so that showed up. And so if you go back to the code and you're like, well, we want to add some more code. Maybe we don't want it to act on every tool. Maybe we only want it to work on the proxy, or we only want it to work on the scanner. It's really easy to narrow that down. Burp gave us what tool was used, and it has an enum of all the tools that it has. And so you're like, hey, was it that tool? Hey, I only want to deal with requests. Was it a request? And then inside of that, we're going to write our own custom function to do whatever we want here. Mine is my custom function find replace, but this is where you're going to, if you go download this and you want to write your own code, this is where you're going to go muck around, is you're going to change the code in my custom function find replace probably. And that needs to both receive a message info and return a message info so that we can communicate back to Burp. And so then we would call that, obviously, with that message info, and we're going to convert the request. We can just ask the message info, hey, give me the request, and turn that into a string for processing. And at this point, you would have, this is the type of code that you're like, I have this really simple problem. This Java code has to exist on the internet. You can find this code by Googling on the internet. You can find code to replace a static string with some other string. So this isn't rocket science coding here. Yes?
Quick question. With this approach, is this going to be pre-intercept or post-intercept?
Is this going to be pre-intercept or post-intercept? I haven't written any stuff that works with intercept, but I believe that you can drop requests, so it may be pre-intercept. I would have to look at the API to be sure. It's documented though. It's just not something I've done.
I think you're right. I think it is pre.
Okay. We have a second vote for pre.
That's for me. Thanks.
And so then, because we're going to do some string manipulation that could throw an error, we're going to wrap it in a try-catch block. And then some more code easily found with some Google. Hey, how do I replace how do I search through an entire file and replace one thing? And so that's all this code does. It's going to go through line by line, and if it contains our target string, which was replace me, it is going to replace it with, maybe I skipped over a slide too fast, but there's a string, the string replace just has the time in milliseconds in it. So some basic functions here to make that happen. And so finally, we're going to set the request back to our new string because we've replaced some stuff in the string. And this whole plugin is now done. That's the entire thing. And so if we were to run this plugin, the first one, so I have a page, it's hello world. And so if you put in world, it says world. And if you put in everyone, it says everyone. And if you put in replace me, it comes back with the time in milliseconds, which is sometime today, earlier today. And so that worked very nicely. And so if you needed a unique value, this would provide you that unique value. If you're testing a web service or something that needs a unique value somewhere, throw replace me in that spot, send it through scanner, after changing it to work for scanner, right? And it would replace that value every single time. And then if you run it through repeater, you can see that it still says replace me on the response side because we told it to only work on the proxy tool. So another thing you can do is you could add a menu to the proxy history. So this was good for something passive, but what if you wanted a user interface and you're like, I just need to do something on command. So you can add a menu to the proxy history. You can add menus other places, but this will show how to do it to the proxy history. So the example I have here is going to have whatever things you select in the proxy history. When you right-click it and you select the menu item, it will highlight them so that they'll be pink, and it will send them to the scanner. And it will also, if they're not in scope, it will ask you if you want to add them to scope. And if you don't, it won't do anything. Well, I think it still highlights it. Maybe it doesn't. It's been a while since I looked at it. But we'll walk through how to do that. As before, you would start with that same Portswigger start project and then go through the same steps as before. And this time, we're going to go through the same steps again. We're going to set extension name. We're going to add a menu. And we're going to, this time we're going to save off our callbacks. Last time we only used it once, but this time, since we're going to use it again later, we're going to save it off into a member variable. And so now, instead of registering an HTTP listener, we're going to register a context menu. So you see that there's a pattern here. You register whatever piece of the interface you want to use so that Burp knows to ask you to do stuff. And so this also only has one function, which is create menu items. And so then you have to create a menu list. You have to do some housekeeping before you can add it. And you have to create an invocation because it's a menu item. And then, so you have, this is some pretty basic, like if you looked up how to do a menu, this is the kind of code that would come up. So you're going to add the context. You want content proxy history, so this is telling Burp, hey, this is, so that it doesn't pop up everywhere. So it doesn't pop up when you right-click in Scanner, and it doesn't pop up when you right-click in a request or response tab or repeater or something. This will tell it only to pop up if you're in the proxy history. And we're going to name our menu item mark and scan because that's what it does. And we're going to add it. And this code will magically make it happen. We'll put it inside this action listener. And we'll set the action command then. If it's mark and scan, this one will get run. And we're going to add a method, just like we added the my custom find and replace. This is basically my custom mark and scan. And we're going to call that from our action listener. And then we're going to iterate through each message we were passed, because now we don't have to just act on one. We could act on a whole bunch of things. So, oh, I liked these 5 requests. They look vulnerable. Let's see if we can find some bugs in these. And so whatever you were passed, just iterate through all of them. And then inside of that, we start getting to, we're going to add a try catch, but inside all of this, we'll be able to add our custom code. So here we're going to make URLs because I think it's important to stay in scope. So you don't want to, oh, well, this website also calls, marketing website over there and stuff that's out of scope that you don't want to be testing. And so I have it automatically ask me if I want it to be in scope, and I can just very easily say yes after this is set up. So if there's just this is the interface into Burp. Be like, hey, I have this URL. Is this in scope? And Burp will tell you yes or no. And then you have some generic Java here. You could Google this up easily to show a confirmation dialog and make a decision based on it. And so if it is in scope, then we're going to send it to do active scan. So you could do this from other mechanisms as well, but you could, here we're going to do it if it's in scope and you clicked on that menu button. And so, yeah, so only if we decided to add it to scope and we did all those things, we'll set the highlight to pink and we'll, I actually set a comment in it, sent to scanner. So then as you're going back through, you're like, did I scan this one? Well, now you know if you scanned it. And so here's what it would look like in use. And so I took 2 pages and I selected mark and scan, and it comes and it asks me, hey, this isn't in scope. Do you want to add it? And I say yes. And so then they turn pink. And if you hopped over to the scope section, you'd see that it added, I added generically, I drop the whole rest of the folders and just add the domain blankly. And then if you hop over to scanner, you can see that index didn't have any cross-site scripting issues, but it looks like XSS probably does. And so that's what it looks like when you get a menu added to your burp and you implement it. So you want a GUI. It's actually not that hard. I avoided it for a long time because I'm not a super Java developer. But it turns out that it's not that hard. I'm not going to walk through all the code for that. But it gives you a lot of interface to, maybe you want to add a list or you want to enter something at runtime, or you just want to turn on and off whether it goes to the scope or to the, if the scope goes to everything or just to what's in scope, or which tool you want to use. So you can actually WYSIWYG design this in NetBeans. And so doing that looks something like this. So this is on my GitHub. You can download this. And it all works. If you check Proxy, it uses Proxy. If you uncheck it, it doesn't. And then you can add, drag and drop whatever other pieces onto this you want to add extra functionality to it, and the code is there. Should be pretty straightforward to see how it interacts with Burp from that point. And so if you actually load it up in Burp, that's what that ends up looking like, which is what hopefully you would expect. Are there any questions?
Are there any resources for people that are just getting started that are good to know about?
There's burpextensions.com. I haven't looked at it in a while, but it has, because you don't just have to write in Java. You can write in Python. I meant to make stuff for that. There's a few other available options. And so there's other people out there that are more familiar with the other languages that write in those languages. But since I started when it was in its infancy and Java was the only thing, that's where I spent my time.
So we had a question which is, can we use Python to write our code?
Yes, you can use Python to write your code.
Okay.
I do not have any examples for you. You'll have to find them elsewhere.
Okay, sure. And another one was, I guess, are there any other kind of tools that you think would be useful for people to find bugs? Just off the top of your head.
No.
I know I think we'll kind of cover that in our next presentation, but if you have any tips.
Not off the top of my head.
Okay. Cool. Well, I think that's pretty much it.
Okay.
So thank you so much, Monika.
Thank you.
Thumbs up. All right. So let's talk about Bug Bounty 101, mainly on web apps. So why bug bounties? For a researcher side, there's always chances of finding bugs that are worthy of putting on your resume. You can always look into getting jobs in the industry by building a good reputation for yourself. And you also have the opportunity to make money for someone like myself who's going to school or going to college to have that chance to make money. For the company side, there is less security breaches, hopefully, better and more secure apps. There are more researchers that could participate from all around the world. You have more experience combined together. There's going to be more bugs coming in with different values or different critical values, and you can't put that experience all together in just one single team. So what are some popular programs? The first one would be Google. Their minimum payout is about $1,300. They do pay $100 for their acquisitions if you find something small on there, and their max payout is $20,000. They have also paid a couple of researchers $10,000 for executing XML. An example would be Detectify was actually able to upload a custom range with a XML file, which allowed them to eventually get read access in the server, as you can see in the picture. Another program that's really popular right now is Yahoo. Their minimum payout used to be $250, but up to 2 months ago it was $250, and they changed it to $50 after that. And their max payout is $15,000, and I know they've actually honored that amount of money quite a few times. An example for that is SQL injection in Flickr, which the payload shows they were able to get other table names from that database. And eventually, that same SQL injection was turned into a command execution, where they were actually allowed to use a load file and read the password file on the server. And the video showed by the researcher he was actually able to write a file on the temporary folder of the server as well. Another popular program is Facebook. Their minimum payout is $500. Their max payout is not, it's unknown. But in an article that I read a couple months ago, they mentioned that if a bug is worth $1 million, they will honor it. There was a bug that they paid for $33,000 almost for a remote command execution, but unfortunately there is not enough details published by the researcher to share with you guys. More popular programs, Microsoft recently just launched their bug bounty program as of September 23rd. Their minimum payout is $500. There is no max payout set. However, the scope of their program is very limited, and only the domains and subdomains that are put on their website is in the scope of the program for money to get paid. Actually, there are a lot more programs out there. GitHub has theirs, PayPal has theirs, Twitter, Square, and cPanel. Of course, Bugcrowd has a list of those put on together. You can go on there and see if a program is just for points or Hall of Fame, or they actually reward you for your findings. There are popular platforms as well. Of course, Bugcrowd. They offer managed and unmanaged programs. They have over 13,000 researchers. 155 bounties are live, according to the website, and they have over 30,000 submissions. And the highest payout was the highest single payout was $13,000. Craftcreaty is another one. They focus on web apps with mainly focus on Bitcoin, and they have about 1,500 researchers. The third one would be Synac. They don't share a lot of data at all with on their website at all. They don't like to talk about their customers or their researchers, but we do know that in order for you to become a researcher, you are required to pass a written test and a practical test. They focus on the web as well as host infrastructure, reverse engineering, mobile, and hardware. Fourth one is HackerOne. They are known to be a security inbox. They don't get involved in the programs at all. They have over 1,000 hackers thanked, 70 public programs, and over 1.5 million bounties paid. They have close to 5,000 bugs fixed. They also have a internet bug bounty where researchers can also submit bugs in PHP, Ruby, and Apache, and so on. So what are some of the basics of bug bounties? Don't make any threats. That's one of the most important ones. You'll see a lot of researchers out there will email a security analyst on a certain bounty program. They get an answer they were not expecting or they were not happy with, and they start making threats. Second one would be don't ask for any money or any swag or giveaways if that's not mentioned in the program rules. Don't compare two programs. When you compare two programs, it's not fair to either one because not every company has the same resources as another. And if you do compare them to prove a valid point to make them realize maybe they're making a mistake, don't lie about it. I've seen multiple times when researchers send fake screenshots that so-and-so company paid me this much, why aren't you paying me that? It's really not worth it. That kind of makes you look bad. And the second important one is do not audit a website without permission. That could cause you a lot of trouble, and it's not worth it, and you don't want that. Some of the things that you should do, it's definitely the program rule and what the scope of the program is. There are sometimes only certain subdomains are covered in the bug bounty program, so you don't go and waste your time hunting bugs on a subdomain that is not going to reward you or get you recognized or whatever on that program. You also find out what kind of bugs they're interested in and what kind of bugs they're not interested in and how much you can get paid per those bug types. You also figure out the requirements, such as how to get an account on the server or on the web application, how to sign up, where to sign up, and stuff like that. Respect the decision. If they decide to say it's valid, invalid, or whatever, respect it. Be respectful towards whoever you're talking to. Your attitude could make a huge change. Respect other researchers, and focus on quality and not quantity. That only helps your reputation, and reputation plays a really huge role in bug bounty programs, and that's because each program has their own reputation system. Google has their own, PayPal, Facebook, they each have their own. Bugcrowd has launch accuracy when they calculate a certain amount of points and show how accurate your reports are. And HackerOne just recently published a reputation system where researchers get a certain amount of points if they have a valid point, and they have a valid report, and they also get negative points if it's invalid or so on. And once you have a better reputation in the industry or the bug bounty programs, you get access to private events and private programs. As you can see here on the chart, that the researcher right here with the light blue, or the second one on the left, has close to 1,000 points. But since Bugcrowd switched to accuracy, they're only at about 30%. And the last one right here with the dark blue on the right, they have under 500 points, but the accuracy is close to 80%. So more points isn't always good. Now let's talk about maximizing your payout. First of all, never doubt yourself. This is coming from experience. There has been tons of times when I tell myself, hey, someone's already tried this program or this web page or whatever, and I'm probably not going to find anything. And a couple minutes later or a couple hours later, I'll find something. Check everything that you come across, every parameter, every post request. Again, there's been times when I just barely look at a post request. Actually, a couple weeks ago, I saw a bug that came out, someone wrote a write-up on the same exact page, same exact thing I was looking at. They found something very huge, which I overlooked, and wasn't able to report it. Check user input validation. Check every form that's out there. Profile pages and search engines that each website offers are always a good place to start. Check out their filters. If they have a filter, can you bypass it? Chances are, a lot of times you're able to. One of the best advice I could give out to someone that also was given to me from another security analyst was to not go for the low-hanging fruits. First of all, the more critical your bug is, the more money you'll receive from it if it's a paid program. You may also run into those smaller bugs while you're looking for bigger issues. And by doing something like that, you also have less chances of your bugs being a duplicate of somebody else's report. find a way that you're comfortable with to find bugs. I always say pick an application or a subdomain, and think of what kind of bugs you want to find. If you want to find SQL injections on that website, or you want to find XSS, and focus on that one first, and then move on to the next ones. I use Google a lot. Example for Yahoo, when I was actually auditing their Taiwan domain, every time I was done with the subdomain that I wasn't interested in, I would just filter it out and look for more searches. If I see sports that I don't like, I will take that out and then go on to the next domain. And every time I try something, and I'll add it, and I will keep that as a text file for the next day and the next day and the next day. So that's one of the ones I have for Taiwan, and eventually there was no more searches coming up, so I had to modify it. Pick up a pattern. It kind of makes it easier for you to find more bugs in a short amount of time. I always look for the same parameter or same functionality of that website in different subdomains first, and if I don't find anything, I will try and go look at other programs. Example, I found 3 SQL injections in a week on a single subdomain of Yahoo by just exactly that search query that I have up there, where I looked up the parameter ID and the file type was HTML, and found 3 vulnerable files in a matter of a week. And of course, I try to find it on other websites, other programs, and this way you can profit. GitHub, Amazon, HackerOne, Google Nest, and all these other logos that are up there are actually not my sponsors, and they were all actually vulnerable to the same bug, which was a bug on Rails that allowed me to enumerate a file, and eventually, if you have a lot of time and you put a lot of effort in, you can actually get a full path disclosure. The tricky part about that actual bug was that if a file existed on the server, like the first picture, it would say file not found, even though it exists. And if it really wasn't on the server, it will give you a 404. And that resulted on me getting a CVE number, and actually I think HackerOne and GitHub were the ones that contacted Rails and got it patched. Making a report, also another big part of bug bounties, is the make and break point of you either making $250 or making $2,500. Google actually put up something on their website recently. It's a really good guide. It's called the Bug Hunter University. But to summarize that, always be very specific. Provide a step-by-step instruction of how you found the bug, what they have to do, where to go, include every single detail. Provide an attack scenario. That's always important, because the other person on the other end of the screen will not look at the bug the same way as you do. Not everyone thinks the same. So you have to explain to them why this is a critical bug. Explain to them if you can actually read stuff on the server, or if you're actually accessing private data, or if you can actually just target a single user, or you can target mass users, or whatever that is. Provide screenshots. It's always helpful. If you do create a video, make it quick and to the point, and make it very professional. And an example of being professional is don't blast really loud music in the background. It kind of it's distracting. Example of a good versus bad report. In this example, I'm showing a report that was sent to Bugcrowd about 18 days ago by a researcher. In the second one right here, you see the same exact report, word for word, for another program by another reporter 11 days ago. And this is actually the original report made by myself on HackerOne about a month ago. So don't go and copy other people's report, be original. It's okay to use the same idea, but copying someone else's word for word report just makes you look bad. Details matter. Caption it properly. Don't go and just put XSS, actually explain where the XSS is. If the form or whoever you're reporting to requires a specific URL, include that and don't just put a short URL for that bug so they can actually access that. Any attack vector or payload needed, include whatever you have used. It just makes it easier to know exactly how you did it so they can actually reproduce that issue. Public disclosure, it varies from program to program. You can always ask permission for publishing your work with whatever program you're working with. Example, Bugcrowd, you can just ask on the program or on your report if they would allow you to publish that after it's patched. With HackerOne, you can just request public disclosure. If the other person doesn't answer it, in 30 days it would become public no matter what, and you can always email them, like I said earlier. There are also some examples of when the program might not want to disclose the bug you found. I've seen Yahoo do that on HackerOne, and that's because there is sensitive information like their IP addresses, like internal IP addresses, path to the file, configuration files, or different sensitive information that's on there they don't want the public to see. What is going to be the future of bug bounties? Hopefully, more and more companies will start to offer bounties. You'll be surprised to know companies like Amazon, Apple, eBay, and Sony don't really offer anything for bug bounties. And hopefully there will be more companies actually offering bounties and money of some sort and not just points or swag or giveaways. What are some achievements from bug bounties and participating in those? You will actually find a lot of connections. You will meet people that are in the industry, people who have more experience than you, and you also meet other researchers that are doing the same thing as you. You get a ton of free services and benefits from different companies. There will be job offers eventually. The cash is always nice. You can always make a little bit of cash. And you also are gaining a lot of experience by challenging yourself and going after bugs on a daily basis or however you do it. You can learn from your peers. That's also one of the best tools you can look into. These are some of the researchers that actually could think of on top of my head that actually publish their work every time they find a good bug, and there are also some of the leaders on the leaderboards on different programs. You can always look into more researchers by simply visiting the platforms that are out there, like Bugcrowd, Crackready, and HackerOne. They always have a list of their top paid or most points. Most teachers have the most points on their website as well. And if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
One, which was from Chris, actually one of the co-founders of Bugcrowd. He was asking, actually kind of related to the earlier presentation, but I'd be interested in your thoughts, Ben. Do you do any sort of like scripting or kind of anything with Burp plugins, and how do you kind of decide when you do stuff manually or when you start scripting stuff?
I always let everything pass to Burp. I'm always intercepting every single request. It kind of makes it easier to look at stuff. It's a little bit more organized. The decoder that I have on there that decodes everything, it's really lifesaver sometimes. And scripting I don't do as much, but there's been times when I actually wrote something with PHP or had somebody help me write something in PHP, and it was kind of more difficult.
Cool, thank you. Can you provide any suggestions and resources to beginners in bug bounty programs? I guess you outlined a lot of that stuff at the end, but is there anything else that you could kind of throw out there? Harish had that question.
Resources, I would say there's tons of books out there you can always get started on. The Web Applications Handbook is always a great place to start with, as well as, like I mentioned, reading people's blogs. That's also one of the things that helped me a lot when I first started. I just went out there and read everybody's posts and how they approach different things, because not all of us look at things the same way. So that kind of was eye-opener, like, oh, I never would have thought of it this way.
Do you have any suggestions, or can you kind of talk about how you find all the different subdomains for these different websites or companies that you're targeting?
The subdomains, I usually find them by Googling them. There are tools out there you can use. First, I use those, and not always you can't always use the dictionary to find those. So what I do is I'll go to Google and I'll put a star.thedomainname.com, and then I filter out the www at the beginning, and you will see a ton of subdomains just coming up that are very popular. And if there's some that I already knew, I'll just filter them out like I was showing in one of the earlier slides.
What are there any tools that you use except for obviously besides Burp, or is there anything else that you use? And are there any programming languages that you suggest people that are kind of getting started to look into and that would be helpful?
Besides Burp, I also use a lot of SQL Map. There are some tricky SQL injections that I probably wouldn't be able to exploit myself, or it would take a lot of time to do it when it's blind or time-based, something like that. As far as programming languages go, I would say PHP and Python are probably the two best ones to look into. I prefer PHP because I have a hard time with Python, but I'm trying to get into that as well.
Okay, we have a question from Marissa.
Go ahead.
So when you're submitting to a bounty, you're kind of against the clock, but what's one thing that you make sure to have in every submission, even when you're short on time?
Honestly, I don't let the time thing being a factor, but if I want to, if I have to do it really fast, I always make sure that whatever I put on there, it's actually reproducible. So just glancing at it, make sure I didn't skip any steps. There's sometimes one or two steps that I would think in my mind, oh, they would know it, but then you'll be surprised that, oh, I couldn't remember how I came across them for a minute, and then have to think about it. So I make sure that whatever instructions I provide them make sense and they can actually reproduce whatever the bug was.